So today's session is on connecting evidence with practice, so it's all focused on the transfer science division. You'll see I've come appropriately dressed in purple to match the purple wedge. Bianca is also in purple, but I don't think we organised that. So this is the transfer science, so the purple wedge. We are about increasing the access and uptake of evidence at the point of care. So that's what we are focused on. I guess it's that evidence at the point of care or at that clinical decision making, that's what we're interested in. So there's a range of, ways we produce and develop our resources targeted at the different groups, depending on the roles that they're in. So I think most people would be familiar with this, and we did talk about it a little bit yesterday. This is, the model for evidence-based decision-making and what you need to consider, the components that you need to consider when making a clinical decision. And we'd all be familiar with it, but I guess the part that I'm just focusing on today is the best available evidence. So acknowledging that context, client preference and professional judgment still are important key aspects, we're really just focusing on what is the best available evidence and how do we get that integrated into care. So evidence if we just consider what we're talking about when we mean evidence at the point of care. So it really is the application of high quality evidence for decision making. But there's some authors here, D'Icenzio and Bailey and Hayes, back in 2009 highlighted that it really was about high quality evidence and people need to be able to have access to that at the point of care. So I was thinking about sort of the realm of the history of evidence-based healthcare, and you can see that there's been this focus on teaching people how to ask the right questions, how to do searching, how to critically appraise, and there's been this huge focus on development of systematic reviews and systematic review approaches, which is all very important, and we need that. But if we're thinking about a clinician or a policymaker, it may not be necessary for them to understand that entire process. It's not necessary really for them to do the systematic review themselves. It is really about them, having access to trustworthy evidence. And back in 2001, there were a group of people, Haynes and Haynes, back in 2001, put out a conceptual framework for basically what they were advocating for was practical resources that were integrated at the point of care. So this is their fifth or sixth iteration of their conceptual framework. I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with the 4S or 5S or 6S pyramid. Has anyone heard of that at all? A few people. So these pyramid, the latest version is the one that's up on the screen now. So Haynes is the consistent author across all of those different versions of the pyramid. But what they presented was, if we're looking at integrated evidence at the point of care, what do we really mean, and what is the best way to do that? And the best way is for that to be integrated into our systems. So we're thinking about electronic health records, clinical decision support systems, to have this really seamless approach where you don't even know that evidence is being incorporated and embedded. You can, at the click of a button, a healthcare professional can access evidence. So I guess that's sort of where we're wanting to head. That's the pinnacle of it all. And then the stepping down from their framework is that if you're not able to have that, then what is the next best thing that you would be able to have? And they have outlined in there these synthesised summaries. So rather than doing the systematic reviews themselves, someone else, like the transfer science team, have taken away the hard work of critically appraising all of the evidence themselves, presenting those best practices or best available evidence, and summarising them in a format that's going to be digestible and easily understandable for people at the point of care. And then you follow down after that, they're saying that, guidelines is then an evidence-based guidelines. So we'd be looking at those that are informed by systematic reviews and where there are no options for systematic reviews, having expert opinion with systematic reviews as the level 2, or step 2, and then single studies after that. So this was in 2018 this was released, so this is the latest version. This is by Brian Alper and both Brian's there, Brian Alper and Brian Haynes. And I think this is a great way to, I guess, imagine where the JBI EBP database fits. I mean, I absolutely love this framework, but I do have a couple of little tweaks that I think we should do. And so I'd just like to present, look at that, it's all fancy, sort of the way I see this being integrated for evidence transfer. So the minor one is that I think the numbering should change, and I think at that first level, if we're thinking what is that first approach, that should be number 1, so that's an easy minor change. But also I've added down at the bottom a 6th level, which is expert opinion, and I think everyone here would be familiar, we're all very familiar with JBI's view of what evidence is, and in an ideal world it's the most appropriate, whether that be an RCT or qualitative studies, and having systematic reviews of those. But in the lack of those type of scientific evidence, we consider expert opinion, and so I would see the importance of adding expert opinion onto that pyramid as well. And then you can just see where the database fits. It is at that 2nd level, that synthesised summaries. Yesterday I spoke about how we are moving towards aligning our software to FHIR, so that's that standardised language system, and that is we're hoping to be able to do that so that we are speaking the same language to all systems out there. It's really clear on how you can integrate different data, different healthcare information into systems. So basically what FHIR, it doesn't require everyone to have the same operating system, it just requires you all to speak a common language. And so that's where we're heading there, so I'm a bit excited by that part there. All of that feeds into our database, so it is an online resource for healthcare professionals. We want them to easily and rapidly access the evidence there, and I mentioned yesterday, it consists of our evidence summaries, our recommended practices and best practice information sheets. So this slide here is just to show you what our methodological process is. So this is thanks to Martin for developing this lovely graphic. So it starts off with topic identification, and there's, as I mentioned, a range of different ways in which topics are identified, whether that comes from a clinical inquiry, whether it comes from the evidence implementation training participant, or whether we identify it as a gap within our taxonomy. And so the topic is identified and inclusion criteria are framed around what we're going to consider. We develop a clinical question, and our questions are quite broad and practice orientated. And after that we conduct a search. So the process that you'll see is very similar to what you would do in a systematic review. We would say that we use a rapid approach, so that's been targeted in some way. So we target key databases. We don't search every database, and that does depend on the question that we have as to what database that is. And then when we're actually doing study selection, we choose the best, the highest quality, or the best available. So what we're looking for are evidence-based guidelines and systematic reviews to answer that clinical question. And then if that's not available, then we search further down. So that's sort of one way that we, target our search. We conduct quality assessment. We use the JBI appraisal tools for quality assessment. And then we summarise and present the information. And the way that we do that now, it's presented in sort of this 2 to 4 page summary. Each study or paper that we're including is presented. We try to remove all the scientific that might be confusing language, and we try to present it in a really digestible, we try to use a really easy to understand language, so that healthcare practitioners can understand what they're reading, and we link back to the quality of that paper as well. Once the evidence summary has been produced, it undergoes 2 stages of peer review. So it gets peer reviewed by someone within the transfer team, and then it gets externally peer reviewed by a member of an expert reference group member or a field collaborator, then gets published to the database, and then importantly, it undergoes a cycle of update. So we are then continually updating. So it never just sits there out of date. So that's our methodological process. But this slide here, I just wanted to sort of show what the similarities and the differences are between a systematic review and an evidence summary. Okay, so they both use a systematic approach to synthesising evidence. They're related to a specific topic where our questions might be a little bit broader. They both maintain transparency in the methods. So we have each evidence summary has a technical development report. This is something that's a relatively new initiative. I think we've been doing it for 2-3 years maybe. So it's the technical development report that includes the question, the inclusion criteria, the results of the critical appraisal, any other comments that we might need to put in there. So they're both systematic reviews and evidence summaries have that. They are providing health care professionals with evidence-based information to guide their clinical decision making, and they both undergo a peer review process. So that's their similarities. In how an evidence summary differs, it's a rapid review approach, so we're aiming for timely completion. We use streamlined methods, targeted database searching, as I've mentioned before. Evidence summaries are the output we produce. It's a much more succinct format, so instead of a 200-page document, it's a 2 to 4-page document. We use clinician-friendly language, and the idea is really to do that so that its resources are accessible and the information can be easily taken up. The evidence, this is a really unique part of the JBI evidence summaries, is that they can be used to develop audit criteria. So our evidence summaries are the foundation of the information and the criteria that gets put into the evidence implementation division and through PACES. So each evidence summary develop best practice recommendations, and then from that, where possible, we will develop audit criteria or standards of care that you can measure your practice against. So that's very exciting, and they are a living evidence summary, so they're undergoing this continuous cycle of update.